How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.
this the end? There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? Oh, I'm burning in the dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the dystopia. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the dystopia. This is the final
Well, hey, everyone. What's up? What's up? Sorry I didn't do a 5 p.m. stream today, but I was busy working and I'm going to tell you guys about what I was working on. And I was also like, you know what? We're going to do a spy stream later. Maybe I don't need to be streaming for 6 hours today. Maybe I just don't need to do that. Maybe I can just do the spy stream. Because we are going to be doing a spy stream into the ACLU tonight. And, the ACLU used to be an organization that was worthy of our respect and admiration. Back in the day when they were defending the free speech rights of neo-Nazis and the KKK, I mean, I think that was certainly worth defending back then because, if you aren't willing to defend speech you find offensive, then you probably don't believe in free speech at all. And the ACLU used to be willing to do that. Do you guys all remember the glory days of the ACLU? They used to actually be willing to defend the free speech rights of neo-Nazis and the KKK. And then everyone forgot what their values were because they completely changed. And now they are a far leftist organization. Well, I mean, they're a progressive organization. I'm not going to say the ACLU is like socialist. They push progressive values more than anything else. But certainly they are one of the primary organizations involving themselves in organizing, like, the bigger rallies that we see, the No Kings protests the ACLU is involved in. They've been piggybacking off of all that. So they're kind of always around. And so it's worth kind of listening in. And I actually am very excited about what we're going to do tonight because we are listening into a call they're doing about abortion. We haven't had a good reproductive justice call in a while. As you guys know, that's one of my favorite things to cover. Not because I love abortion. I don't love abortion. I've never even had one. But it's just one of those creepy dystopian topics. And I know a lot of people are very sensitive to this topic, but like the far left takes their admiration and advocacy of abortion to an absolutely lunatic, maniacal degree. And I find it's one of those things that I watch because I find it so profoundly disturbing. The left has done more to make me pro-life than, quite frankly, the right ever did. Now, I'm not pro-life. I am pro-choice. I'm pro-choice with limits, safe, legal and rare and all that stuff. And I think it's a very sad thing. And I think having an abortion should be, the hardest decision you ever make, essentially. But I do think they should exist because for reasons, as a woman who's been, raped, I think I would have liked to have one if I had needed one in that eventuality. And so, So I am pro-choice, but it's not the right and the pro-life movement that's made me significantly more pro-life than I have been in years past. It's actually the left. And, the first event that I ever went undercover at was a reproductive justice conference at Hampshire College in Massachusetts. And I went on a self-managed abortion tour where I was taught to have an abortion doula and worship myself at the altar after I had my at-home bathroom abortion. And that was, quite frankly, a really disturbing experience for me. And so I don't like this stuff, but I find it interesting to watch from like a pure dystopian kind of like, I love horror movies. I love that sort of like creepy thing that you feel like you shouldn't be watching it, but this is like real life. Anyway, so we're going to get the latest ACLU talking points on abortion. Their live training starts in about 8 minutes. We are watching a live training tonight, guys. So this is going on live. I'm going to log into their Zoom call. I'm going to show you what's going on their Zoom call. That's what Spy Stream is. We don't know what they're going to say. We don't know what they're going to do. We don't know if they're going to kick us out. We don't know if they're going to find out that I'm streaming this and cancel their training because they don't want the public to see. Normally, I do Spy Streams as a supporter exclusive Spy Stream. Tonight's a little bit of an exception because I don't actually think the ACLU is going to care if I stream this. I don't think they care. So we're going to stream it and we're going to watch it. And, really, they should be really proud of everything they say on this webinar. So they should want the public to see it. It's a publicly available thing that anyone can sign up for anyway. This is going to be a call about, let's see. Look at this. Pride was always a protest, and we are in this fight for the long haul. On this call, we'll break down the latest attacks on trans rights and reproductive freedom, connect the heights of reproductive justice and trans justice. See, this is another weird thing. How many times have I told you guys this? So the left views trans rights and reproductive justice as basically the same thing. So anytime the left is talking about trans rights, they're also talking about reproductive justice. And anytime they're talking about reproductive justice, they're also talking about trans rights. This is very important for people to know because you need to be aware that when you write laws and things about abortion, they're also going to be written to apply to trans rights. I promise you, this is a problem that they had in Ohio where they made abortion like a constitutional right. And in doing so, they inadvertently made transing kids also a constitutional right. And so then they had to go back and fix that later. And that's because when the left is in charge of writing abortion laws, they link it intimately with trans rights, which inevitably has to do with transing kids. So we have to be aware that they see these two issues as one and the same. At that reproductive justice conference I went undercover at, they were literally talking about trans rights side by side with reproductive justice. And so it is just one of those tricky things the left does that if you're not aware that they do view these issues as basically the same, you might not be aware that when they're writing pro-abortion laws, they're also writing pro-transing your kids laws because they view it as the same and they're very tricky about the language they use for explicitly that purpose. So you have to be sure you're watching out for that if they're trying to push that stuff in your state. Highlight how the ACLU is pushing back in courts and legislators and in the streets. Share how you can join us in building real, lasting people power. And this is going to be a Zoom that they're going to start in about 5 minutes. We will be logging into it shortly. Just as a reminder, guys, if you want to support the work I'm doing and keep me in business, because I am 100% supported by people like you that appreciate that I take the time to find out about these meetings. I expose them to you. We talk about the subject matter. We break them down so that everyone can understand it. Mostly, I'm just trying to shine a light on what the left is actually teaching and doing and how they're organizing and how they strategize and the things they're thinking about and how they view the world, because if we don't understand our enemy, we can't defeat them. If you want to support what I'm doing, you can head over to my Substack, which is my primary way that you guys fund my work, and sign up for a membership of $8 a month, $80 a year. I would really appreciate it. A new initiative I have just launched, and the thing I've been working on all day, quite frankly. Here's another way you can support my work is by donating to my brand new nonprofit, the Center for Left-Wing Studies. And you can find that at leftwingstudies.com. Click the give button at the top. It's a little bit clunky right now because I'm trying to get something to work on the website that isn't working yet, but that's okay. You can go and make your donation here. All donations made through the Center for Left-Wing Studies are tax deductible, which is really cool. We already got some people donating. Look at that. Thank you to everyone who has donated so far to support the Center for Left-Wing Studies. How cool is that? I want to raise $10,000 by the end of the year. That's going to go to being able to pay people to do data entry and help me build out all the archiving projects that I want to do. I've actually been working all day, guys. I'm so close. I'm so fucking close. I have this on the back end, this map working, where if I input an organization into the database, it automatically shows up on the map, and we're literally going to map the modern left in America right now. And I'm so close to making this work, and this is what I've been working on all day. It's working on the back end, and I don't know why it's not working on the front end, because I can see all the pins in the map where I put in organizations, Democratic Socialist one specifically on the back end. I can't see it on the front end, but how cool is it going to be when we finally have a directory of all the far left organizations, and I'm building it in a way where anyone can add them, anyone that I give permission to anyway. So what I want to do is build out a team of people who are helping me input this data, and then it's automatically going to populate everywhere, and that's what I've been working on building, and I'm so fucking close, and it's going to be so cool, and it's going to be so helpful, and it's going to be so awesome, and that is what your donations support, one of the projects that we're doing for the Center of Left-Wing Studies. You can find out more about that over at leftwingstudies.com. One wild note is going over the history of the USSR and Germany is totally different since I learned the language. Seeing how the makers of the videos definitely brings much more to light. Yeah, isn't that crazy, two ladies? I do appreciate that. Thank you for the super chat. All right, let me get up the Zoom link. And guys, as a reminder, sometimes there's an error with my Zoom where I need to shut down my browser and log back in. If that needs to happen, I'll be right back. You don't need to worry. Okay. They're not in. We are signed in for the webinar, but they haven't started yet. Oh, I also do want to thank. Yes, so I am going to be doing a call for volunteers. But just so you guys know, and I'm actually really happy about this because I heard from so many of you that so many of you want to volunteer to help with the data entry for this, which is a huge help. I do want to be able to pay people to do this at some point. We're obviously not there yet. But I am going to be doing a call for volunteers after I figure out the system. So I'm building the system first, and I want to make sure that I know how to use the system, and then I'm going to be doing a call for volunteers. So sit tight, like we're building that out. It's going to be cool, and so I appreciate all that. But I want to make sure I have a good instruction manual. I want to make sure to make it as easy as possible for people to just input the data because it is a little bit of work, but it's not difficult. I just want to make sure I know what people are supposed to do. Pete, I also want to thank you for going to the Library of Congress for me today and asking them about the HUAC committee hearings. We have found out that we need to talk to the National Archives and CBS because apparently CBS owns the rights to the HUAC committee hearings, and isn't that funny? Why doesn't CBS just make those hearings publicly available for everyone? This is national history, and CBS is like hoarding the copies of the HUAC hearings. So I put it. I contacted them. I was kind of like, how do I get access to this stuff? I'm a researcher. I'm due to use it for a nonprofit. All that stuff. So we'll see what CBS says. Our next step is also to talk to the National Archives to see what they have because apparently the National Archives might have video. I would really like to get as much of it. There is some video that's archived publicly on the internet, but it's like hard to find. I would really like to get the full video for the HUAC committee hearings at some point. And even if I even wonder how much it would cost to just license all of it from CBS, like for nonprofit purposes to make it available to the public. No, well, I can't because CBS owns the rights to it apparently. So it's not public content because CBS recorded it. So I feel like they should just make it publicly available though. It's public interest information. It's stupid that they're making people paying licensing fees. But we'll see how much it is, and maybe we just crowdfund it. I don't know. I would really like to make all that publicly available, though. I think that would be really interesting, honestly. You emailed them too, Leonard? Okay.
Recording in progress.
I'm taking my freedom, putting it in my car. Wherever I choose to go, it won't take me far. I'm living my life like it's golden, 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 living my life like it's golden.
I have to exit.
I'm taking my freedom, putting it in my song, singing.
DC button on the bottom of your screen and select Show Subtitles. If you have any questions at all during this presentation, whether it's about how to use technical features of Zoom or the content, please drop your questions into the chat. We'll be able to answer them all in that way. We'll be able to get to them shortly once you've dropped your questions into the chat. And if everyone could just go ahead and mute themselves if they're not speaking. Awesome. So again, tonight we have closed captioning available. We also have translation available. And if you have any questions throughout tonight's presentation, you can always share them in the chat. With that, I just want to pause and turn it over to our Spanish translator to introduce herself and explain a little bit about how to use our translation logistics.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. My name is B. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm here with the CLC, or the Community Language Cooperative. And I want to thank you for your commitment to language justice, which means that everyone should be able to listen and participate in the language of their heart. In a moment, we'll activate the interpretation function, and you'll be able to choose the language of your heart by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Once you see that icon, you can click on it and select either English, Spanish, or ASL as the language of your heart. I want to remind folks to please speak at a conversational pace so that we're able to provide an accurate rendition of your message. I'll repeat this in Spanish and then we can get started. Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Vi Torres, mi pronombre es ella. Yo seré una de sus intérpretes del español esta noche y me acompañan dos colegas de interpretación de señas americanas. Les agradecemos su compromiso con la justicia del lenguaje, lo cual significa que todos tenemos el derecho de hablar en el idioma de nuestro corazón. En un momento activaremos la función de interpretación simultánea en Zoom y aparecerá un globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Por favor de hacer clic en ese icono y elija inglés, español o el lenguaje de señas americanas para poder escuchar en el idioma de su corazón. Muchas gracias, ya podemos comenzar. Thank you very much. We can go ahead and activate the interpretation now.
Awesome, thank you so much. We're going to start our interpretation. And again, if you need that information, you can take a look at the chat feature or the Q&A feature and share any questions you have in Q&A. With that said, I just want to share a little bit about who we are at People Power, and just a quick note on the chat feature. So the reason we've disabled our chat is just because we have a high volume of participants. And so it's much easier for us to respond to all of the questions that y'all may have by responding via the Q&A feature. So again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to drop those questions into the Q&A feature, and then that way we'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. So moving on, I just want to share a quick pitch about what ACL People Power is. If we could go to the previous slide. So ACLU People Power is our nationwide grassroots army of volunteers who are fighting to protect our rights and defend our communities. I know many of y'all may have come from our community today and are joining as volunteers, as people who are actively involved in the movement. So just a huge shout out to everyone who is joining from that space. It's so much more urgent than ever before in this current moment to come together, to get organized, to learn, and to equip ourselves with the tools that we need to fight back. So while you're on our call tonight, please sign up to be a volunteer with our People Power movement. We have some of our staffers who are here to drop information in the chat. So they'll be sharing the link on how to get involved and how to volunteer with us in the chat. So please, if you do one thing tonight while listening to this conversation, make sure that you sign up to get involved. We can go to the next slide. So with that, let's kick things off. We know that there were a number of high stakes decisions from the Supreme Court this year. These decisions involved free speech, LGBTQ rights, abortion, and immigration, and they go to the heart of our constitutional protections. And that's why we're here today, to learn together and understand how we can fight back together, especially in a moment where our rights to gender-affirming care are being attacked, where our rights to reproductive freedom are being attacked. And so that's why we're all here tonight. And we're so glad that you're with us, to learn with us, to have this conversation with us, and to commit to the movement building that we need to do in order to win. So just a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. We're going to do some grounding, talking about the current moment that we're in, what we're seeing happening right now. Then we'll turn it over to our guest spotlight, Chris, who is the Director of National Campaigns and Transgender Justice at the ACLU. We'll then talk about what it means and what it looks like to build power together and how you can take action today on this call. And then finally, we'll transition into our Q&A section, and then we'll close. We can go to the next slide. Great. So before we dive into talking about strategy and action, talking about what's been going on, we first have to take a moment to really ground ourselves in the current moment, because we know that we're not organizing in a vacuum and we're not seeing these injustices happen in a vacuum. We're gathering just weeks after Pride. This is a moment where we were meant to be celebrating queer joy, community, and resilience. But we also have to remember that Pride did begin as a protest against police violence, against systemic neglect, and against a culture that treated LGBTQ people as disposable. That protest spirit wasn't just historically important, it's also important now. And that's what's bringing us here today. So let's talk a little bit about the landscape that we're in. If we could go to the next slide. So first and foremost, we know that the US v. Scrimity Supreme Court decision was recently ruled. The Supreme Court recently ruled in US v. Scrimity. This case is one that directly impacts trans people's access to healthcare. The Supreme Court chose to uphold Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for trans youth. This was a devastating outcome for young people and their families who are simply trying to live with dignity and access the care that they need. And this decision has left essential healthcare unprotected and to be determined state by state. And your access to care, we know, should not be dependent on our zip codes. We know that this is something that everyone should be able to access. So it's a super concerning thing that's happening that we're keeping an eye on here at the ACLU. If we could go to the next slide. Another critical case that we know has recently been discussed in this space before in one of our last action calls is Medina versus Planned Parenthood South Atlantic. In June, the Supreme Court ruled that states could block abortion providers like Planned Parenthood from participating in their state Medicaid programs. And later that week, Congress defunded Planned Parenthood in H.R. 1, which is the so-called Big Beautiful Bill Act, by prohibiting reimbursements to preventative services like cancer screening and birth control. Both of these things are provided by Planned Parenthood to Medicaid enrollees. These actions could severely reduce the access to all forms of reproductive care, all forms of sexual health care, of contraceptive care, and truly make abortion access inaccessible, even in states where it remains legal. We could go to the next slide. So we're also tracking a really disturbing federal bill that was introduced by Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. This bill would equate providing life-saving gender-affirming care for those under the age of 18 with child abuse, and it would impose fines and criminal penalties of up to 10 years in prison just for providing or supporting that care. This isn't just fringe rhetoric. It's part of a coordinated national effort to criminalize trans existence and deny the basic right to make decisions about our own bodies. So again, we know that this is not happening in a vacuum, and we know that this is a concerted effort to take away our rights, take away our bodily autonomy. If we could go to the next slide. This is where we are, but we know that Pride has always been a protest. And so I want to remind y'all that even though this moment may seem dire, we are not without our power. If we could go to the next slide. I just want to remind y'all that we do stand on the shoulders of giants who sparked the first Pride celebration with their resistance at Stonewall. I want to remind us of this quote attributed to Micah Bezant, but also attributed to Marsha P. Johnson, who was a mother of the trans and queer liberation movement, and who reminds us that there's no pride for some of us without liberation for all of us. And that means that we're all together in this moment, that as isolating as it may be, that as scary as it may be, we still have so much to celebrate and we still have so much to fight for together. Tonight is about channeling our anger, it's about channeling our fear, and it's about channeling our helplessness into community, into resistance, and into action. And I'm so glad that we're able to do that together tonight. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Chris, who's going to talk to us about more context and just help us understand where we go from here in this movement and in this fight. Chris, if you want to join us now. I think you might be muted.
I can hear you, Chris.
I think we're still having some issues hearing you, Chris. Sorry, folks, we're going to figure out what's going on the technical end, so give us just a few minutes.
See, I'm just going to keep talking.
I think we can hear you now. Perfect.
Okay. Folks can hear me? Yes, maybe, hopefully. Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to start over. So it's good to be here with folks. I'm also glad that y'all can now hear me. My name is Chris Hayashi. I use he, him, or just Chris. I am the National Campaigns Director for Trans Justice. I am all of nearly 3 months into being at ACLU National. Just a little bit about me. I've been involved in movements for social justice for over 30 years, and for the last 20 or so, specifically in movements for trans rights and justice. So I want to start out this conversation today by just first grounding us in a little bit of history and context for the current moment that we find ourselves in. So I think it's important always to say and name that as trans people, as non-binary people, that we have always existed. We have always been here. You find us throughout many cultures throughout history. And what we've seen over the last 10 years, though, is a dramatic increase in visibility. We have trans and non-binary people on TV, in movies, on bestsellers lists, on magazines. We have trans politicians. We've just seen a drastic increase in visibility. And I can remember actually when Laverne Cox was on the cover of Time magazine. This was about a decade or so ago, and how significant that moment of visibility was for the trans community and movement. I also remember because I was traveling at the time, and I, for the life of me, could not get a copy of Time magazine. I could not get a copy of the version with Laverne Cox on the cover. And I remember actually being in the airport and kind of secretly trying to read over someone's shoulder who did have a copy of the magazine so I could at least read the article. But that was a real significant moment and change in terms of the visibility of our community. But what we've also seen over the last 10 years is a drastic increase in attacks on our rights and lives. The conservative right has advanced a coordinated strategy to attack the rights and lives of trans and non-binary people. And I remember when this first started, and again, it was about a decade ago. So it was around the time we also started to see this increase in visibility. It started by these quote unquote bathroom bills that we started to see around the country. You know, and I will say, as someone who had been in the trans movement for a while at that point, our community was used to being under attack. But what we were seeing then was different because it was very clear that it was coordinated. It was a coordinated strategy by our opponents to attack our community. So at the time, we saw maybe a dozen bills in a few states across the country. And we were able to defeat many of them. And that's been true for some time. But now we're at a moment where over the last 10 years, the attacks by the conservative right have just escalated. They've escalated year after year. So at this point, this year, there were nearly 600 anti-trans bills introduced in state legislatures across the country. And the landscape for trans rights has changed drastically. So you see on the slide a map, and it's from the Movement Advancement Project. And in orange are the states that have passed bans on healthcare for trans minors. So at this point, we live in a country where over half the states have banned healthcare for trans minors. A similar number of states have also banned trans young people from playing sports and engaging in school activities with their peers. Other states have passed laws restricting our access to identity documents. States have passed don't say gay or don't say trans laws, erasing us from schools. And I think what's important to note is that many of the attacks that we're seeing by the conservative right are attacks on trans children and youth. And I'll just share a little bit about myself and my experience. So I am definitely on the older side of trans community at this point, but I knew from a very young age, like I can remember being 4 years old and knowing that I was not the gender that my family, that teachers, that people were saying that I was. Like I knew from a very young age. I did not have the words to say that I was trans, but I knew that I was different and I knew that I was not the gender that was being placed on me. So I know how different my life would have been had I had access to the healthcare that I needed, had I had access to the support that I needed at a younger age. So in addition to the attacks that we've seen at the state level, now, as all of us know, we are in a second Trump administration, which has escalated attacks on the rights and lives of trans people alongside so many other communities. The Trump administration has erased trans people from government websites. There have been anti-trans executive orders. The trans military ban means that thousands of trans and non-binary people are now losing their livelihood. The unlawful detention and deportation that we are seeing of non-citizens as well as citizens all across the country. What we also know is that for trans people, for trans migrants to be placed in immigration detention, to face deportation to your home country often means facing violence, harassment, medical neglect, and in some cases, death. And so this is for a community that was already facing high rates of violence, harassment, and discrimination, lack of having our basic needs met, particularly for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, women and femmes, migrants, youth, elders, people living with disabilities and HIV, poor and low income people, like trans people at the intersection of identities have been particularly vulnerable. But what I also know is that the trans movement is stronger than we have ever been. There are more trans leaders and trans-led organizations all across the country, hundreds of them, many of them very small grassroots organizations who are doing all they can to keep trans and non-binary communities and our families alive in this time. We have trans politicians, we have national trans organizations, and we have powerful co-conspirators like the ACLU. So what we also know, though, is that the attacks on trans people are part of a larger strategy by the conservative right to use attacking trans people along so many other communities to advance an anti-democratic agenda. The conservative right, and I'm just going to name that again, the conservative right is using attacking trans people as a strategy to advance fascism and authoritarianism. And we know that the attacks on reproductive rights and trans rights have gone hand in hand. The same forces attacking trans people have also been attacking reproductive rights and justice for years. In fact, our opponents are using the very same playbook to attack healthcare for trans people that they once used to erode access to abortion care. And once abortion became more of a politically toxic issue for conservative politicians, they then went full force, making trans people a scapegoat in order to win elections. So we know that reproductive justice and trans justice both involve bodily autonomy, self-determination, and transgressing gender norms. And restrictions on both boil down to one thing. They boil down to control. So it's no coincidence that these attacks in our communities are occurring alongside an escalation in immigration enforcement. All of our freedoms are at stake when in record numbers, our friends, families, and neighbors are snatched off the street by masked federal agents and detained indefinitely far from family and community support. But what we know is they cannot take from us what we won't give them. We refuse to tolerate these threats to our freedom to make decisions about our own bodies, regardless of whether we are trans or not, if we can get pregnant or not, if we are citizens or not. We all want and deserve the freedom to make decisions about our bodies. And I want to tell a little bit of a story about the ways in which reproductive justice and rights movements and trans movements have intersected and shown up for each other. Because I think this is a moment where the ways that we show up for each other are so important, and the stories of how that happens and has happened and continues to happen are so important. So this was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I was at the Transgender Law Center at the time, and it was when the Texas Attorney General declared that loving and caring for your trans child is child abuse. And I remember when that declaration happened. And then literally less than 24 hours later, we started to hear from our partners in Texas that families that love and care for their trans child were starting to be visited by state investigators, accusing them of child abuse. So this, while we had been facing these anti-trans attacks for years at this point, this was a very clear escalation in the attacks on our lives, our rights, and our community. And I remember in that moment being really clear about the road that we were going down in terms of the protections for our families, for trans young people, and our access to healthcare. And knowing that the reproductive rights and justice movement had been on this same path. I'll also name that this was all happening in the midst of the period in which Roe was overturned, when the leak happened. So this was also a moment of extreme escalation for the reproductive rights and justice movement. But I remember in that moment, just knowing that like we needed to connect and we needed to get their advice about how we were going to handle this escalation and attack. And so we reached out to one of our partners in the reproductive justice movement. And I remember that they responded right away and they got on the phone with us. And again, this was in the midst of Roe being overturned. And they said, look, like we have been watching what has been happening over the last few weeks. We've been thinking about trans communities and movements and how we can show up and support. And we are here for you. Like, what do you need to know? What can we share? We've built up infrastructure to make sure we still have access to healthcare. Like, how can we connect you to that? It was this powerful moment of solidarity and showing up for one another in a moment in which both of our movements were under such an intense attack. If we can go to the next slide. So that's a good segue into talking about how we're fighting back. So as was mentioned earlier, ACLU and Lambda Legal were co-counsel in the US v. Skermetti case, which was recently decided by the Supreme Court. While we of course hoped for a better decision, trans communities and our allies took that moment to show our collective power, resistance, and joy in the face of this decision. In partnership with Lambda Legal and other national partners such as the Transgender Law Center, we prepared for when the decision was going to drop. We planned a week of national activations where we would be able to show that as trans movement and community alongside our allies, that we were all aligned on our understanding of the decision, where we could control the narrative and combat any misinformation, that we would be able to center trans communities most impacted by the decision, and empower our community with clear calls to action to direct our fight forward. We were able to organize ahead of the decisions a national network of over 400 organizations representing 48 states who were ready and waiting for when the decision dropped. This resulted in over 50 local activations in 45 cities, representing 26 states over the week after the decision happened. And so you'll see on this slide images from a couple of the activations. In Florida, they organized a massive rally. In California, which is the one on the bottom left corner, at least as I'm looking at it, in Santa Barbara, they organized a protest. In Idaho and Tennessee, they did an art project where they had a trans flag, and on the flag they have handprints which represent all of the young people in the state who lost access to healthcare due to the decision. There was a large rally in Chicago led by trans organizations that was a day of resistance. And then the next day, they had a community picnic to show trans joy They had activities for trans youth and other young people to really center joy as well as resistance in the face of this decision. So we had trans folks and our allies all across the country activating and showing our power, our resistance and joy in the moment of a decision that was definitely absolutely devastating for our community. So as we look ahead, folks may have heard that the Supreme Court granted cert in 2 federal cases involving transgender youth, challenging bans on their participation in local school and college sports. These are 2 cases. ACLU and Lambda Legal are co-counsel on one, and ACLU and Legal Voice are co-counsel on the other. And so as we are preparing for this decision, yet again, yet another decision in which our rights will be decided by the Supreme Court. And as we continue to live and exist, all of us, in this moment of escalating anti-democratic forces and continued attacks on trans people, as well as so many other communities, we will continue to fight back, collectively resist, build power, and uplift trans joy. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll turn it back over, and am excited to see what questions folks have.
Thank you so much, Chris. We can go to the next slide. So I know I can't move directly into cheerful optimism, even if that is my usual go-to to respond to these moments. We have to acknowledge that the threats that we're facing can feel isolating. They can feel scary, and they're engineered to make us feel powerless. That is the goal of these threats. But we have to keep fighting back. We fight back in every arena, at every level of government, and we're doing it together. We're not just going to be fighting at the federal level. We're also fighting this on the state level. We're also fighting this in our local communities. And everything is part of this fight, right? So whether we're sitting down for an action call and learning more about what we're up against, whether we're communicating with our community members and sharing that knowledge, or whether we're showing up at a protest or taking an action, all of these things are tangible ways to make a difference. And if we could go to the next slide. I just hope that this space is a reminder that we're not alone, that together we can stop panicking and start organizing. And I love this image because it is such a reminder that together we can take down the threats that are facing us, even if they're very big, because together in numbers, we're much larger than that threat. So let's talk about just a few ways right now that you can take action tonight at this very moment. We'll go to the next slide. So first and foremost, I want to talk about this action that you can take tonight from the comfort of your homes. Everyone should pull out their phones and scan this QR code, or go to the link that is going to be dropped in the chat by our staffer, Alex. This link is directly about Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill. So this is an option to take direct action on something we heard about here tonight. We know that this bill is a huge threat to gender affirming care. We know that this bill is attempting to criminalize gender affirming care for folks under 18 years old and create massive barriers for anyone trying to seek gender affirming care. This bill has incredibly dangerous implications for our rights and for our collective rights as a country. So we need to all scan this QR code now, go to our message action page, and send a message to your legislators tonight, letting them know that this bill is unacceptable, that we have to take action, making sure that we're fighting back against this bill, that when our legislators go to vote, they're voting no on this bill so that it doesn't progress any further. So again, go to the link that's in the chat or scan the QR code, and let's take this message action together right now. We'll take a second to give everyone the chance to scan or click the link. And if we could go to the next slide. So the next thing you can do is start getting more involved in all of the incredible trainings and all of the incredible resources that ACLU People Power has to offer. One thing we've been working on, a new series that we've launched, is our Organizing to Protect Democracy training series. This is a 4-part training series that helps prepare our activists to learn how to start working to protect democracy in their communities. So you'll learn everything from how to do relational organizing, how to do effective legislative advocacy, how to work with your communities and network with activists across the country. All of these things are covered in our trainings, and they're ongoing iterative trainings. So throughout the year, throughout the coming months, we'll be able to learn together and grow together and equip ourselves to do the work to organize our communities, to do the work to fight back against all of the threats that we've been talking about tonight. So again, scan the QR code and sign up. This training is taking place on Thursday, August 7th at 8 p.m. Eastern, and we'll come together and specifically at this training be talking about relational organizing, which is how we build organizing movements from the comfort of our communities, thinking about leveraging our trusted relationships with friends, families, neighbors, and building from the people we know to start building change. So it's a really great opportunity to learn some truly effective stuff. So if you have the chance and the opportunity and you're free on Thursday, August 7th, just make sure that you sign up and join us. We can go to the next slide. And most importantly of all, I would love if everyone who's here tonight signs up to volunteer with ACLU People Power. I saw some comments in our Q&A box about what we're doing beyond just having these monthly action calls. These monthly action calls are spaces for us to check in as the work continues, but we are volunteering, we are doing text banking, we are phone banking 24/7. Our volunteers are super active and engaged, and they're part of the movement every single day. So whether you're interested in hitting the streets or joining us to phone bank on our call teams or participating in our texting teams, make sure you take a moment to sign up and join our volunteer teams at the ACLU. You can also get involved with your local affiliate if you go to aclu.org/affiliate. There's a lot happening in your local communities because we know that a lot of these pieces of legislation are targeting our local communities. So it's a great way to get involved on the state level as well. And then again, if you have any questions, you can always drop them in info@peoplepower.org, shoot us an email. We have a real person answering those questions, and they're also a volunteer. So make sure that you send any questions or comments our way. We're always listening and we always want to respond. And finally, we do have another action call coming up in August. So make sure that you stay tuned for our next People Power action call. These are our spaces where we're checking in with our activists on a monthly basis. We're getting us geared up for what's to come. So with that, we'll turn over to Q&A and we'll run through some of the amazing questions that y'all had for us. So first and foremost, Chris, one of the main questions that I was seeing was specifically about Kaiser Permanente in Northern California. They just announced that they're no longer offering gender-affirming care or surgery anymore. And so folks are wondering what we can do to fight back against this.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll say a couple things. One is that for states like California, where there is not a ban on gender affirming care for minors, and there's a number of states in the country where that is the case. It's definitely important for us to maintain healthcare there for as long as we possibly can. And that said, so what we're seeing in terms of some providers starting to roll back care, even when it's still legal, is definitely something that we need to slow down and that we should raise our voices about. I would say that I would definitely get in contact with your local ACLU affiliate to see what they're doing in that area, because it's also, I will also say that it's a bit of it's complicated. in terms of how we can actually have some impact in terms of maintaining care. So I would really recommend, please get involved with your local affiliate, ask what they're doing about it. I mean, I think those are good ways to plug in, as well as with any local trans organizations. I mean, California has such a strong trans movement. And I know that folks are really following what's happening with some of the pre-compliance we're seeing, particularly from some of the larger providers, which, you know, I will say, like, Kaiser's been one of the places that has really been at the forefront in terms of providing gender affirming care for trans folks. So I think if there's anything we can do to slow some of the pre-compliance we're seeing, that we should. And I just think it's really important that it's part of whatever your community's strategy is, that it's linked to kind of local community and movement strategies.
Thank you, Chris. We had another question that I thought was really salient, which is support is all well and good, but how do you get the medical care that you need in these times?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And so, and it's complicated. I mean, if you live in a state, if you're a young person, a trans young person, and you live in a state where there's an active ban, you know, it means that it's going to be much more difficult for you to get the care that you need. Absolutely. If you are a trans adult, you know, I mean, I know that the reality is that when providers have stopped care for trans young people in states where there's bans, that's often meant that there's been decreased access for trans adults. And, you know, and also naming that for trans people, even before all these bans started to go into place, we already were facing difficulties accessing the care we need, though it was much, much better than it had been in the past. So I would say that the best thing to do, if you're not already, is to get connected to local trans organizations, as well as to the affiliate. Those organizations will know who are the providers who are still providing care to adults in states where it's legal, and will also, if I'm not sure if this question is about minors or adults, but if you're a trans young person or the family of a trans young person in a state where there's bans, I think being connected to the local trans organizations is so important, and being connected into local community who can help you to figure out how to navigate this moment, and also make sure that you're getting the support you need. So it's a bit of a complicated answer, but I think when it comes down to it, what is most important is to be connected to trans community in whatever region you're in. That is what I know has always gotten us through, even before we had rights and protections on the books, right? Is like our community looked out for each other, took care of each other, and that's going to continue to be what we need to lean into, even in these times of escalating attack.
Thank you. Another question we got was, is it a risk bringing trans youth medical care and transgender girls and women in women's sports to the Supreme Court first before dealing with the basic issue that Trump is claiming there are just two genders? Will the wins by the right on trans youth medical care and trans girls and girls sports strengthen the case to go after other rights?
Yeah, so I should have also said at the start of this, I am not a lawyer, so just naming that. But what I'll say in answer to this question that I think is really important to name is that we are not the ones who are bringing these issues for decision, right? Like, we're not trans people, trans community, trans movement, trans lawyers. We were not the one who started to call into question whether or not we should have access to healthcare, whether or not we should be protected from employment discrimination, you know, whether or not like trans young people should be able to play sports. We are not the ones who pose those questions. It's the conservative right that moved forward these issues as part of their larger strategy, right? They have had a very clear strategy of attacking the rights and lives of trans people, particularly trans young people, our access to healthcare, trans young people's ability to like play sports, to just be young people, as a way for them to build their base, to build their power, and to move forward an anti-democratic agenda, right? This is their strategy. So we have not had a choice, right? In that, and similar to other movements whose rights are under attack, this is how we fight back. But I just think that's really, really important to name, right? Is that this is how we are resisting, how we are fighting back against opponents who are attacking us as a way ultimately to harm all of us, whether you're trans or not, right? They're moving these attacks forward as a way ultimately to push back against democracy and to build a world very different from the one that all of us want to live in.
Thank you, Chris. There was another question specifically about what the predominant motive is. I was wondering if you wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, no, and I really want to thank whoever asked that question, because I do think it's sometimes like we enter into these conversations about trans rights, about bodily autonomy, without taking a step back and just making sure we're all kind of operating from the same information. So I'm really grateful for whoever asked that question. So the way that I'll answer it is that I'll just share a bit about myself, because I think it's one of the best ways to illustrate and help folks to understand trans community and identity. So, when I was born, the doctor told my mom and my dad, "Oh, you have a girl," right? That's what the doctor said. However, as I said before, like I knew from very young that was not who I was. Like I can remember being 4 or 5 and very clearly knowing that I was not a girl and just being very, very confused about why, and this is in a very kind of gender binary way, but why I was being expected to look like, do things in ways that my sister did. I remember being just very confused and distressed by that, because that was not who I saw myself to be. So being trans is about how you understand yourself to be in terms of gender, which is different than sexual orientation. So I am transmasculine. When I was born, the doctor said I was a girl. I've always known myself to be a man, boy, when I was younger. And that is very different than who I am attracted to and who I partner with. It's a totally separate kind of identity, right? So I'm a transmasculine person who also happens to identify as queer. However, there's many trans people who identify as straight, who identify as bi, who identify as asexual. So I hope that helps to get just kind of an understanding of what we're talking about. And again, just super thankful for whoever asked that question.
Thank you so much. I think building off of that, another question is just what's the best way to respond when someone says, this issue doesn't affect me personally, or more broadly, if someone is in sentiment with you, but not ready to go there and take the action and be actively in solidarity with you. So what does that process of building that up look like?
That's a great question. And I'm going to answer it, but I did realize there was a second part of that last question that I did want to answer, which is around more around kind of what healthcare looks like for trans young people. And so I'll also again name that for myself, like, so I'm 50 years old. So I grew up in a very different time, right, where access and understanding around trans people was very different. Like it wasn't something that my parents knew about. It wasn't something I knew about. Like it was not something that I would ever been able to access. However, I know that had I grown up maybe a decade ago, so before these bans, and had access to the gender affirming care that trans young people have access to, which are really a lot around both like social transition, but also hormone blockers, which really just delay changes in your body that happen in puberty, so that when folks are older, they can decide what other kind of medical steps they may want to take. So I just think that's important to name. Like, I think there's a real myth that there's surgeries and things like that for trans young people. That really does not happen. We're really talking about social transition. We're talking about access to medicines that will delay puberty so that folks can then make decisions when they're older. And I will say that if I had had access to that type of healthcare as a young person, I know my life would have been drastically different, would have been drastically improved. I did not have access to healthcare, to gender affirming care, until I was in my probably mid 30s, because it just was not something that I was able to economically access. And I remember because that was when the ACA started covering some forms of gender affirming care, but then when I was able to access it. So it's life changing for young people and as well as for adults. And then so to your question, which was around like how we kind of move people along with us, right? I think it's a great question, and it's also why I was really excited to be on this call with folks, because in this moment where there are attacks happening from the Trump administration by facing so many communities, right? There's so many attacks, from immigration to the environment to voting rights, to reproductive justice and rights. Like there's so many attacks happening. One of my greatest fears in this time has been that our movements for justice, our movements for change would leave trans people behind. So I think that for folks who are on this call and are here to learn and take in this information, it's so important. And what I would say in terms of bringing other people in your life along, that I think it's about baby steps, right? Like we all have people in our lives. We have friends, we have family, we have people, we have the guy at the bodega who we see every day, right? Like we all have people we interact with on a regular basis. And I think it's important that we are strategic, right? Because in this moment, we need to bring as many people along as we can. And it's important that we're strategic about it, right? Like I am not asking you to go to your super transphobic, anti-immigrant aunt and convince her. But maybe your cousin who, maybe did in the past have a little bit more conservative views, but in this moment is kind of like, oh my God, what is happening? That my friend just got picked up by ICE, like is starting to question, like that person, right? That is a person that you can like start to have some conversations with and bring them along over time, like sharing about, oh, I went to this webinar and I learned about what's happening with trans communities. Did you know about it? That type of thing. So I think looking at the people in our lives who either we know are somewhat with us and we can get them to be more active, like bring them to the next call, or folks in our lives who, maybe in the past might have not agreed with us, but now are starting to question because what they see happening, like starting to like share information with them and build them towards a place where they can get more active. So I think it's definitely a process. It's about baby steps, but that's the one thing that all of us can do in this moment, right? Like I know that I feel overwhelmed often by everything that's happening, but that bringing people we are in relationship with along and closer to our side is something that literally everyone on this call can do. And that will be part of building this bigger base, this bigger tent that is ultimately what's going to get us to the world that we all want to deserve.
That's so powerful. Thank you so much for that incredibly important reminder, Chris. I think we have time for one last question. So I want to uplift this question. What advice would you like to give to parents who have trans children who are experiencing anxiety about not being able to access hormone treatments or care in the future?
Yeah. I mean, first, I have so much love for the parents of trans kids, just so much love. And I also think that you all are some of the fiercest advocates and organizers for trans rights. So just first, a lot of love and appreciation, and please just keep doing what you're doing. And I guess I would say two things, and it a little bit echoes what I had said previously. Like one is that, just to know that trans communities, trans movements, we have always been here. We've always taken care of each other, even before we had rights on the books. And that there are folks in community and movement, trans elders, I don't think I'm quite there yet, who have that knowledge, who know how to navigate through these times. And so I think really leaning into the elders in community is really, really important. And hearing their stories and just being in relationship, which I think also connects to, I just think, again, it's important to be connected to community. Like if you're not already connected to your local ACLU affiliate, to your local trans organization, that is just so important. Like there are trans organizations at this point literally all over the country, and many of them are small, but they are the spaces where you'll be able to be in community, get support, get access to resources, and also learn some of that historical knowledge that still is living in our communities and movements about how we can navigate it in this time where we're losing access to healthcare and other rights. So yeah. And again, just like a lot of love to whoever asked that question.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're coming up on time, but I do just want to thank every single one of you for showing up tonight. I know this fight isn't easy, but every single one of us does have a role to play in pushing this movement forward. Wherever we're doing the work, whether it's showing up to these monthly action calls and learning and listening and sharing that information with your communities, whether it's volunteering and getting further involved with the ACLU and joining our phone banks, joining our activations, or whether it's getting more involved in your state and local communities, wherever you are, know that even the littlest thing that you're doing is going to contribute to the overarching movement, is going to help us make a difference. This fight is long, but we are in it for the long haul, and the folks who came before us were also in it for the long haul. And so again, I just want to thank you all so much for joining tonight. Please make sure to stay involved with the ACLU. Please make sure to stay involved with our People Power space, and know that we will have another action call coming up in August. And we do these action calls every single month as a way to check in with our activists, to share knowledge with our activists, to take action together, and to prepare ourselves for the coming months ahead. This is a movement, not a moment. And so let's keep that in mind as we close tonight. Again, thank you all so much for being here. And please reach out if you have any questions. You can email us at info@peoplepower.org. Thank you all. And thank you, Chris, for being with us tonight.
All right, that's it. That's it. That's the end of the webinar. So it was rather lackluster tonight. We did get some good quotes of just them saying the things that we knew they would say, but we're gonna have everyone ready to have a little chat. Let's have a little chat, conservatives. Let's have a little chat, because honestly, I almost ended the spy stream like halfway through it and just was like, I don't want to do this anymore because of all the dumb shit people were saying in the chat. And I just want to address a couple of things. Listen, it's fine to be new. And I know that there are people that are new to this. And I know that there are people that are gripping on to their conservative bullshit talking points with every single fiber of their being. For example, we had the retard Paul who came into the chat and said, yes, they're communists and socialists. There's nothing progressive about these people. Well, Paul, actually, no. No, the people we were watching tonight were not communists and socialists. They were progressives. I wouldn't have been streaming it live on the internet publicly if they were communists and socialists. I only do this with progressives. They're progressives because none of them actually wants to overthrow capitalism. They're not even reformist socialists. They don't want to overthrow capitalism. They don't want a post-capitalist society. They want to try to push things as far left as they can, but they do not want to actually overthrow the government and abolish the Constitution. And it's very easy to tell the difference between progressives and actual socialists once you actually start listening to the left. Unfortunately, people like Paul here like to run around saying, clowns like you are giving them cover and you're why we lose. Are you fucking retarded? Are you fucking retarded? I'm going to bet you Paul has never actually done anything to push back on the left in his life except post memes on the internet, but I'm part of the problem. Yep. Okay, that was retarded conservative talking point number one. I want to address this. I'm not saying Pete is a retard. I appreciate Pete. I'm not saying he's particularly. I'm just addressing this point. People in the chat were talking about, like, why is the ACLU trying to gather signatures to get Marjorie Taylor Greene to, like, do something about her bill? Obviously, the ACLU isn't going to convince Marjorie Taylor Greene to do anything. That's not the point. They don't care about convincing Marjorie Taylor Greene to do anything. They know they're not going to convince her. They know that no matter how many signatures they get, they will never, ever, 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 ever convince her to change that bill. That's not what Marjorie Taylor Greene would do. It's not even what the ACLU wants her to do. The reason they're doing that is to give their constituents something to do. They're engaging them in some small way. And guess what? How many signatures did they have on that? I did pull it up in my browser. They have almost 60,000 signatures on that. 60,000 people have signed that petition. That's 60,000 people that they've given something to do that is actively participating with the organization. The reason they do that is because once they give people one thing to do, it's easier to get them to do a second thing. And once they do that second thing, it's easier to get them to do the third thing. And once they do that third thing, it's a lot easier to get them to do that fourth thing. What they're trying to do is actively engage people in a variety of actions. Some are going to be really simple, like doing that petition. Some are going to be going to a protest. Some are going to be giving money. Some are going to be fundraising. They are building a pipeline. That is what they're doing. The right doesn't do this at all. The right just texts you endlessly stupid things asking for your money. No, it's not busy work. No, it's not. Only literal retards. You were one of the primary retards in my chat tonight. I'm going to tell you that. You have got a lot to learn. And if you're going to survive on this channel, you're going to learn quick. You're going to learn to start listening more than you talk. Because the amount of retarded shit you specifically said in my chat, I almost fucking banned you. Just for, like, the amount of stupid shit that I don't want to hear coming up over and 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 over again. We do not do retarded conservative bullshit narrative talking points here. We do smart people content here that's hinged into reality. See, we got this guy, and they feel great about it. Yeah, they do feel great about it. Do you want to know why? Because they're winning and you're losing. They're winning and you're losing. How, like, the amount of people that were like, these people are stupid. This is boring. I don't know why we're doing this. Do you want to know why the left is winning and you're losing? Because they are doing things every single day while you are complaining on the internet about how boring it is and how you have jobs and about how you can't do anything. That's why the left is winning and you are losing. And you can call them stupid all you want, but you're still losing to them. So what does that say about you? I'm confused about how people like that can be in positions of power. They shouldn't even have jobs. The person that you guys were all so bored by is a national policy director with the ACLU. They have more influence, even when they don't control political power, than anyone in this chat has tonight. And so maybe, instead of dunking on the libs to make ourselves feel morally superior, perhaps we should be listening and learning what they're doing so that we can become more effective. If the right was really smart and not a bunch of raging, unhinged, fucking retarded morons, what they would do is do exactly what the left is doing, but do it with better ideas, and that is how you beat them. The left is doing what they're doing with shitty ideas that aren't going to work. But they're still winning because the right is doing fuck off nothing. And this is just the sad part of reality, guys. If you have two groups of people, and one of those groups of people has bad ideas, but they're willing to do the work and they do it every single day and they show up and they do these stupid, boring phone calls and they engage people and they get 60,000 people to sign a petition and they get people to show up at protests and they're doing all this stuff. But even if their ideas are bad, they're still going to win because the other group is doing nothing. So it doesn't matter if your ideas are better. It doesn't matter how many times you debunk them. It doesn't matter how many times you own the libs. It doesn't matter how many times you insult me and say, you're a communist for showing their material. It doesn't fucking matter. Because you're literally doing nothing while they are doing everything. Thanks, Nomeo. I appreciate it. You think this was so boring tonight? Then organize a meeting like this on your side and see how many people you can get to show up. Because I promise you, no one is showing up on the right to meetings like this. And it's not because, oh, it's boring. It's because the right's fucking lazy. There is no one on the right that can organize a meeting like happened tonight, even though it was boring and their ideas are stupid. They've still got people showing up. They've got people engaged. They've got people out there doing stuff. The right has memeing and dunking on the libs to make themselves feel better. And you wonder why the left continues to win and the right continues to lose. You know, I almost like this whole experience honestly kind of made me think that I'm just going to do spy streams as supporter only moving forward. Because the thing of it is I'm kind of in a weird place right now, and then I'm doing a lot of this research stuff. I kind of only want to be around people who are serious about this. That's kind of how I feel about it. Like, I understand it's important to welcome new people into the fold, and I'm working on doing that, and I'm working on trying to build materials to bring new people along quicker. But the amount of absolute retardation that I encounter on the internet every single day, it is driving me insane, and I can't do it. If I'm constantly pissed off at hearing the same bullshit conservative talking point over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, when we do these as supporter exclusive streams, there's no conservative bullshit narrative showing up in the chat and then people arguing with me and then people saying, you're a little communist, instead of actually listening to what's going on and learning from it. It's like, there is nothing that you can do to make people take this seriously that are determined to not take it seriously or that are too fuck off stupid to understand what is going on right in front of them right now. But oh man, they'll high five and dunk on the libs and watch that libs a TikTok video and feel like they accomplished something. It's maddening. It's maddening. Yeah. And guess what? At the same time, the GOP is absolutely losing young people. And it's not that those young people are becoming Democrats. It's that they're becoming like dissident right-wingers, like extremely far right-wing fascists. And I don't actually really have a problem with that. I actually kind of love that young people are becoming fascist. But not everyone likes that. But I want to point out that like the GOP is not only losing to the fucking left in terms of the culture war, in terms of the overall arc of what's going on, they're also losing the youth on their own side because they're behaving so fucking stupid. And it's kind of like, listen, I understand that sometimes people don't have access to information. And I understand that sometimes people learn things. And, you know, I've had many older people come onto my channel. I've had many boomers come on my channel who had no idea what was going on. And then they listened and they learned and they were like, holy shit, we had no idea about any of this. And so I'm not saying that boomers can't learn and boomers can't be taught, but my God, there are so many stupid boomers. Like, it's so maddening. And it's like they're NPCs and they just say the same thing over and over and over again. They don't have jobs. They're mentally ill. They're not progressives. They're communists. Kamala Harris is a communist. They're stupid. They're narcissists. Why are we doing this? It's boring. They don't have jobs. We have jobs. We can't do anything because we have jobs. They're stupid. They're lazy. They're insane. They're mentally ill. Over and over and over and over. And who's funding them? Soros is funding them. Obama is funding them. This is all Obama. Who's funding them? And by the way, the people who ask who's funding them, like, what the fuck are you even going to do with that information? Honestly, what are you even going to do with that information? Because God knows no one ever does anything to cut the funding anyway. By the way, the ACLU is supported through donations. There are nonprofits supported through donations, probably grants as well. The ACLU has a fuck ton of money. You think you're going to cut off the ACLU's funding? Good luck. Good luck. Just like you can't cut off the funding of most groups on the left because they're not funded from the places you think they're funded by. People really thought that if, we just got Soros, well, guess what? That's not where most of the funding is coming from. And it never was. That was a conservative bullshit talking point. And it's just like, man, so dumb. So dumb. So dumb. The conservative right is one of our biggest enemies. Like, the left is not actually our biggest enemy. The left is like the final boss. But we have to go, it's not their big. The left is the big final boss. But this is like, I'm just gonna go back to my roots. I'm gonna go back to like Super Mario Brothers. That was like, I'm an old man. That was like the first video. Well, it wasn't the first. I played Atari before that. But everyone remembers like old school original Super Mario Brothers on like the NES, right? Everyone knows what I'm talking about or has some idea what I'm talking about if you're younger. Mario Brothers, you had to beat 8 different levels before you got to the final boss. You had to beat smaller bosses before you finally got to the big boss, Bowser, that had kidnapped the princess, okay? So the left is the big boss. Yeah, I totally agree. Super Mario Brothers 2 was the best one by far, and Princess was the best. Like not even close. I couldn't agree more. I love Super Mario Brothers 2. Anyway, that's not my point. My point is that we have several smaller bosses to go through before we get to the big final boss. And one of those bosses are boomers on the conservative right who don't listen and don't know what the fuck is going on and are just reading an NPC script. They're our enemy. We are not on the same team. Just because they think they're anti-woke or anti-leftist, they are not on our team, guys. I promise you. Stupid boomers who refuse to listen slow us down more than almost any other group out there. The other group is classical liberals. Classical liberals are the enemy. They are not our friends. They are not on our side. Classical liberals will do nothing but allow the left to win over and over and over and over and over again. And not only will they do nothing, they're going to turn on you at some point and they're going to start lying about you and defaming you and like all this stuff. So conservative boomers who don't fucking listen are the enemy. Classical liberals are the enemy. Conservative influencers who lie to their audiences all the time are the enemy. And I don't give a flying fuck if these people consider themselves to be anti-woke. They are not anti-woke because they are running cover for the real far left and they are allowing the real far left to win because they misinform their audiences all the time. Any conservative influencer that is lying to or deceiving their audience about who the left is our enemy. All of them. They are not on our side. They are not on our team. Well, why don't you play nicely with them? Why don't they tell their audience the truth? Why am I supposed to kiss their ass when they're lying to their audience and they're making my job harder? And this has been going on for years and years and years and years and years. It's like, the reason that conservative boomers are so fucking misinformed about what the left is doing is because they hear something on the TV and they go in that direction. I was listening to someone talk about this. I was listening to Amalek talk about this, where he's doing these Twitter spaces. He's trying to talk to Christians about, like, he's basically trying to talk them out of being Christians. And actually what he said, it wasn't exactly, obviously we're doing different things, but what he said was, he said, when they get conservative boomers that they're talking to, they're able to have a conversation with them sometimes, and they're able to get them to come along with it. And then they always know when the conservative boomer has then gone back and watched Fox News or some other conservative shill outlet, because all the progress that was made during the original conversation, where you think the boomer is listening and you think they're coming along and you think that they understand, it turns out that as soon as they hear something from Fox News, they go right back to ground zero, because they're just NPCs that are just, they're not thinking. They're just trying to like make you feel good, or like make things less uncomfortable by agreeing with you, or they're trying to go along with it. Or maybe they even think when they're going along with it that they agree with it, but then they listen to something on Fox News and they go right back to square one. And it's like, you can't change people like that. They don't have the mental faculties to follow along. They have been destroyed by the media. They've been destroyed by the conservative influencer machine. They have been destroyed. Like their ability to reason and think has been completely destroyed. I'm not much of a chatter, so okay, well, let's see if you're if you've ever been a chatter. No chats ever on this channel. Okay. I'm not much of a chatter. Can you tell me how the left defines capitalism before I answer you? I don't know how to say your name. SXZCA. Can you tell me how the left defines capitalism, please? Okay, but now I'm asking you a different question. I'm asking you how the left defines capitalism. Can you please answer that? No one else answer. This is just, I want to see if this person actually listens to my work. How does the left define capitalism? And the reason I have to do this is we get conservatives in here all the time doing stuff like this, trying to cause problems. And so now I have to give tests to see, anytime someone chats in and they're like, Karlyn, I'm your biggest fan, but I just don't like this thing that you said. How does the left define capitalism go? I need to know if you've actually watched my work before. Because I promise you, anyone that has watched any significant portion of my work knows how the left defines capitalism. This is like the shibboleth. No. There's nothing to work on. So, okay, now I automatically don't believe you. There's nothing to work on. You already could have typed it in. No. No. Are you Googling? Are you doing fucking ChatGPT? Let me tell you what. I promise you, this person has never watched my work in their life. I said no one fucking answering. Then type it in. No. Okay, so no. So you don't actually watch my work. So this is exactly the answer I was looking for. You don't watch my work. You have no idea what's going on. You're just here to cause problems. We now have your number explicitly, because anyone who watches my work knows what the definition of private property ownership is. And this is an example of a classical liberal who is doing nothing but causing problems, because either they don't fucking listen or they're overtly lying, and now they're trying to get a clip of me saying something so they can use it against me on the internet. You have trouble with conservatives, liberals. What name do you use for your side? Fucking fascist. That's the name I use for my side. Fucking fascist. I want to ban all classical liberals. I want to ban all boomer conservatives. I want to ban conservative influencers that just lie to their audiences all the time. I want to ban queer theory too. I want to ban all this stupid leftist bullshit too. There's a lot of things I would ban, but classical liberalism is going to be on the top of the list of ideologies that I would absolutely ban, because it does nothing but cause problems. So fascist. Welcome. Classical liberal, just here to cause problems. We are banning all retards. We are banning all stupid ideologies. We are banning all stupid people from speaking ever again, because I'm sorry, if you're not smart enough to say something that's actually intellectually honest, then you should just shut the fuck up. Generally how I feel about it. I just subscribed and I think both parties are crap. Yeah, see, this is the type of person I can work with. This is the type of person that gets it. Yes, both parties are crap. I consider myself a conservative. No, you don't. No, you don't. But I don't think Republicans represent... Well, maybe you consider yourself more on the right. Yeah, the chat already is restricted to subscribers. And then I weed out the stupid retards for myself. And you also said a lot of fucking retarded shit tonight. This is correct. Yes, I agree. Classical liberals are like herpes. You might think they're okay until they pop up. Yeah, that's you know what? Exactly. Classical liberals might be my current number one enemy, with conservative boomers and conservative influencers a very close 2 and 3. And then we've got the left, like, way off in the distance as the final boss, that we can't even get to the final boss until we go through several other bosses. Anyway. Well, that's all we have for tonight, guys. I'm going to go do some work, and I'm going to go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go make a massive archive of leftists on the internet, and I'm going to create a system for us to be able to track all the leftist groups all over the country, because we can't trust anyone else. We have to gather all the information for ourselves. We can't trust any news media. We can't trust any influencers, because they're all dumb as fuck or narrative shills. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go spend the rest of my night working on a database, and I'm going to try to build out ways for other people to contribute to that database. So it's not just me, because God knows that's not going to work. I have to have as many people as possible inputting data into my new Center for Left-Wing Studies project to actually make this work in the way that I want it to work. But I got to build it first. And so, you know, that's what I'm going to go do. That was the Hammer of Reality, brought to you by me. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, also Hulk Hogan, man. Hulk Hogan, can you believe that? My God, I get like, I loved wrestling growing up. I loved professional wrestling. The Undertaker was my favorite. I was a little bit like older. I started watching when I was older, so I wasn't there for like Hulk's original years. But man, what a legend. What a legend. Anyway, you know what? But he lived an epic life. I mean, you can't be upset at the life that guy led, right? Anyway, that's all. That's all. I'm going to go cry into a pillow now. And, I'll be back tomorrow for happy hour, and we'll drink beer tomorrow, and it'll be great. No, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted at all. I wanted that one. There we go. I will be back at 5 p.m. tomorrow, where we will watch some sort of drama content on the internet, and I will inevitably get drunk and probably cry and yell and do all sorts of other things. And, you guys will allow me to do it, because that is the arrangement that we have. I make a fool of myself on the internet, and you guys let me do it, and you guys laugh, sometimes with me, sometimes at me. It really just depends. But you know what? At least there'll be beer. At least there'll be alcohol. I will not be sober, and that's, good. I'm going to go work on a database now. See you guys later. Have a good one.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer. is influencing my thinking and consequently my action.
What is it you're trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.